Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes, and I'm pleased to say a special guest on the podcast today, someone who's been on it before, Simon Wilde, the cricket correspondent of the Sunday Times and also regular author as well. In fact, I'm annoyed because you've beaten me. You've written more books than I have. You've written 13 and I've only written 10, and your latest book about Gilbert Jessop, the 1902 star of the England team, scored this amazing 76 ball 100 allegedly, which the Bazballers have been trying to chase inadvertently over the last few years, and still his record stands as allegedly the 76 ball 100, the fastest 100 ever scored by an England batsman. You've done some research to show that perhaps it was even quicker than that in your book. We'll come to that because clearly Gilbert Jessop was the original Bazballer. So we'll talk about that, but we should just talk first about the prospects for the fifth test here at the Oval. Part of the reason why we're talking about Jessop is because his great 100 was here, wasn't it, behind us in 1902. But looking ahead to the fifth test against India, the big news, Ben Stokes is out. That will surely have been circulated around the news channels now. How does that affect England, do you think? I mean, that's a sort of, I suppose, a rather sort of basic question, but I mean it's a big issue, isn't it?
It's a big issue. We have been here before. Last year against Sri Lanka, he was out of the whole series. Ollie Pope stepped in and England won 2-1. They did make a bit of a mess of the match here, actually, the final test, and lost it. And then they went to Pakistan and Pope stood in again for the first test in Multan, where England actually got 800 and achieved one of their most famous celebrated wins. But Stokes is a huge loss as a leader. He is going to be here at the game and sort of pulling the strings a little bit in the background, but he's a massive loss. But he's been England's best bowler, seam bowler, throughout the series. He scored 100 in the last game. He had one of his best matches for England in the last game, so he's a huge loss. Yeah, but it doesn't mean England can't win the game. They've shown that they can win games without him.
So a much changed side for England. Stokes obviously out. He has a shoulder tear, which the scans showed would be further damaged if he played. So he's decided, very much a wrench decision, decided not to play because he would do more damage to it potentially. Potentially a 6-week recovery period, 6 to 8 weeks to recover from it. So Jacob Bethell comes in for him, effectively going in at number 6 and to be able to bowl some spin, and a change in the bowling attack as well. No Jofra Archer and no Bryden Cass, so they're replaced by Josh Tongue and by Gus Atkinson, and also Liam Dawson that doesn't make it, so he's replaced by Jamie Overton. So England have basically a 4-man seam attack, very different to the last test match, not that dissimilar I suppose to the first test of the summer against Zimbabwe, because both Josh Tongue and Atkinson played in that game. But I mean, they're still pretty good bowlers, aren't they? I mean, I'm not so convinced by Overton, but I think obviously Josh Tongue's had an impact. We've seen Gus Atkinson have an incredible year last year. Hasn't played much this year, has he?
No, not well. He played the Zimbabwe test, didn't he?
That's when he got injured.
I mean, so we've got a seam attack with 3 new bowlers in it, which is quite radical. Tongue and Overton are sort of bang it in, sort of short ball people, really. The role that Cass played. Stokes can also do that as well, but Stokes can bowl in different styles, can't he? But so those, yes, you need the pitch it up types as well. Stokes said in his press conference just a little while ago that the pitch has got a bit more grass on it than some of the others, which will be a relief to everyone, I think, given everyone but the batsmen, given the pitches we've had so far.
Well, it certainly looks green behind us there. You can just see it actually if you're watching on video here, in between the covers. It's quite green. It'll have another cut in the morning, but I think it will have a bit more grass, a bit more carry, and certainly when Surrey play here, it does something for the seamers. So that's obviously,
and that's why
England
they think they can manage without the frontline spinner. Bethell and Root can do some part-time work, can't they?
Obviously, it's a sellout. I suppose that the punters will be disappointed. No Stokes, no Archer, potentially no Bumrah, and obviously no Rishabh Pant. So quite different teams, and the superstars, some of the superstars are missing.
They are, but we've had so much eventful cricket, and there's quite a bit of aggro, as we know, that this contest doesn't need, it's got enough, it can stand on its own 2 feet, it's 2-1, the series can still be drawn, obviously, so there's a lot to play for, and even though obviously some superstars are missing, I still think it's going to be a great game, and it'll be a great occasion.
Yeah. and it's so well balanced, isn't it? So well poised. The fact that England are missing Stokes, I suppose, is Ollie Pope is now captain. Stokes, interestingly, said he thinks that, when asked in the press conference, he said that maybe longer between tests would be better, to spread the tests out more evenly, instead of a 9-day gap between some matches and a 3-day gap between the 4th and the 5th. 5 days between each would be better. It sounds quite sensible, that.
It does. The problem is that the scheduling, you then get to the stage where what day of the week does the match start on? Because
does that really matter? I mean, I suppose it does from a corporate entertainment point of view, but does it matter from any other point of view?
It's interesting to ask the ground authorities about that, but I think in London, Lords and the Oval, you can sell a test match pretty much any day, but I think maybe elsewhere it would matter if it was. They like to start on a Thursday, day 3, day 4, over the weekend. That sort of works as a basic rule, and Thursday is the normal day, Wednesday if not. So I don't know. You could end up with a Monday start or something, which would be pretty unusual. I think we've only had one of those ever. So that's the issue. That's why they don't do what he's suggesting. Interestingly, in Australia, at the start of the Ashes, we have a week's break between the first and second tests, and another week break between the second and third, and then they're bunched up at the end. But I think Australia have done that to preserve their fast bowlers. They're looking after them. They're thinking, if we can win the first 3 tests, we've won the Ashes. But so they need them fit for that chunk of the series. So, in fact, both teams will benefit from the week off during the first 3 matches of that series.
Yeah. It's a week of excitement with this match and the series so well poised. It's also a week of sadness, actually, this week for 2 reasons, well, 2 players' reasons, really. Obviously, on Friday here, we're going to remember the life of Graham Thorpe, who died nearly a year ago. Obviously, sadly, took his own life. And there's been actually quite a lot about the coroner's inquest into his death, which has been quite traumatic reading, hasn't it? And all the papers have covered it.
Yeah, no, it's a very distressing story all round, really. I mean, it's heartbreaking. But Friday will be a chance, as Ben Stokes just alluded to in the press conference again, that it'll be a chance for cricket to show how much they loved him. He was a great cricketer. He was England's best batsman of the 90s, really, in all conditions. Yeah. Pacey pitches, spin pitches. He could score runs on anything.
Played 100 tests.
Played 100 tests. And then was a significant coach, and particularly a significant coach for this group of England batsmen. Stokes and Root especially have spoken about how important he was to them. So it'll be a chance for the game to commemorate him and remember him, and hopefully give him, the sort of tribute that he deserves.
Yes.
Yeah, the tribute he deserves.
And actually raise awareness of a mental health charity as well, isn't it? I think there's people are wearing headbands, is that right?
I think they're going to wear the Graham Thorpe headband, yes, which is another nice touch, really. I think Surrey and England have put a bit of thought into this, and it should be great.
Yeah. I attended the funeral of Wayne Lkins a couple of days ago, actually, another former England player, fantastic batsman, someone who I thought was probably years ahead of his time, actually, had incredible timing. He timed the ball better than anybody and took on the greatest bowlers of the world throughout his career. Didn't play many tests, but when he did, he had an impact. And he was just a fantastically charismatic character, a happy-go-lucky sort of cricketer, someone who would take on the best bowlers and hit them for 6. Funnily enough, not dissimilar in style, I would say, to Gilbert Jessop, who we're going to talk about in a bit, and a guy who just loved life, really. He probably drank and smoked far too much, and that didn't help his end. But he was a great person to play with. I played with him for 2 years at Durham, and I mean, the kind of guy he was there was a match for Durham against Leicestershire. Rained all day, didn't start play until 5:45, and the umpires decreed that we'd have to play 5 overs. Pointless, really. And the pitch was like the outfield here, absolutely green as anything at Grace Road, Leicester. Hard underneath, green on top. Leicester had this very fast bowler, David Milnes, who was absolutely rampaging down the hill trying to get early wickets. He took an early wicket, and unfortunately I was night watchman. So I went into bat with Wayne Lkins at the other end. And Lkins loved the challenge of a fast bowler. 2 overs to go, I'm at the non-striker's end. This Milnes bowls 2 serious lifters, fly past Larkins's head through to the keeper, 30 yards back. he goes for a slightly fuller ball, third ball of the over. Lkins sways back and thrashes it past cover, sort of head high for 4. Fantastic shot. And I'm sort of at the non-striker then thinking, surely I should be facing here. And I'm feeling really nervous, actually, because I didn't know how I'd cope with this pace of bowling. Mills was quick. So Mills is furious. So he flies in and bowls 2 more heat-seeking lifters. One just shaves past Lkins' nose. The next one shaves his shoulder. Both of them taken 30 yards back by the keeper, and by this time I'm shaking my boots at the other end because there's still an over or 2 to go. Last ball, Mills goes for a fuller delivery, thinking I've got him now, he's going to nick it or miss it and get bowled. Lkins drives it through the covers, he launches it through the offside with such force that it rebounded off the boundary balls back to the bowler. It was absolutely sort of shell-shocking batting. And I thought, well, what at the end of the over, what's he going to say? We met in the middle. I thought, what was he going to say? He's going to say some sort of adrenaline-induced comment or a bit of advice or something, and he just went, piece of piss, and walked back. And that was it. And he was just such a wonderful cricketer who loved life and revelled in everyone else's success as much as his own. So greatly missed. And Ian Botham, Peter Willey, Jim Watts, some other legends from Northants, people like Richard Williams and others turned up for the funeral. It was quite an emotional affair, actually, in Kenilworth in Warwickshire. So, again, he had a great send-off, but he'll be much missed around the circuit.
I just remember him being picked by Gooch for the West Indies tour 1990, when Gooch he had a clear idea of how he wanted to take on the West Indies. He picked like an all-seam attack, I think. And he picked batsmen who could play pace, and it was a sort of like a courses for courses pick of the sort that this England team do quite a lot, where they pick a Bashir, tall spinner for India. They know what they want and they're going to pick him regardless of almost whatever he's done in county cricket. And Gooch plucked Lkins out of county cricket. I don't think his numbers were especially striking, but they would have been okay. But he wasn't the obvious pick. He was a bit of a surprise, but he did the job, didn't he? He coped. He had the courage to take on those fast bowlers, and England won the first Test in Jamaica, having not beaten West Indies in a Test match for 17 years or something. Something ridiculous. A very long period. Yeah. And they won the first Test. They didn't win the series, but they were very close to doing so. But he was a terrific player.
He was a terrific player, and in fact, he was the inspiration. One of the inspirations for me growing up, watching cricket on telly. There were 3 people I really admired: Viv Richards, obviously, Botham, and Wayne Lkins, because I just found his flair, his panache with the bat, and his fun-loving sort of demeanour really infectious. And I was privileged to play with him for a couple of years at Durham, and he actually scored 100 against every county. Not many batters have done that. So, much missed, both men, both Graham Thorpe and Wayne Lkins, and it's good that we're going to have something to celebrate Graham Thorpe's career on Friday. So we'll just take a quick break, and afterwards we'll talk about Gilbert Jessop. So Gilbert Jessop, now, he was known as the Croucher, wasn't he, in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Give us a bit of background to his life.
Well, he grew up in Cheltenham. He had an unfortunate event when his father died when he was in his mid-teens, 14, 15, and up to that point, his father was one of the governors at the local grammar school, and so Gilbert was educated there. When his father died, he had to leave the school, so he went off and became almost like an assistant teacher at some other schools around the area, to carry on his education, but also sort of earn some money as a teacher, really. So I mean, it's a sort of arrangement you wouldn't get now, but the consequence of that for his cricket was that he didn't continue at the sort of school that might have educated him as a cricketer, and he might have had formal coaching. He didn't really have any formal coaching. He was self-taught, and the way he played his cricket was basically like every sort of youngster. He charges down the wicket to try and smack the ball as far as possible. When he bowls as fast as he can off a long run, and when he fields, he throws himself around like a madman. And that's basically how he played his cricket, and he never had the sort of coaching that would have knocked some of that stuff out of him. And he said, had I been formally coached, I would not have played the way I did. So he was a sort of untutored, raw cricketer, but actually that worked really well. So he was highly unusual There wasn't anyone else quite like him.
And he was a fast bowler originally, wasn't he? Who sort of turned to batting. So quite similar to Botham, even, and maybe Stokes actually, as a cricketer. Someone who went absolutely full bore at the pitch and tried to bowl as fast as he could, but also had this batting ability. And I suppose, I've often thought with Botham that he could have scored more runs if he hadn't put so much effort into his bowling. He would have had more to give with the bat, but because he was a very strenuous, a vigorous bowler, he needed rest, and you can't play 4-hour test innings with that sort of bowling role. Jessop, though, didn't bowl as much as Botham did, became a real kind of fixture as a fast-scoring batsman.
Yeah. So yes, he bowled a lot in his younger days, and he was picked for his first Test match in 1899 against Australia as a bowler. I think he batted well down the order, but he bowled so much that he actually developed back problems, and his bowling declined around the time that he played the innings here in 1902. He was already becoming a more marginal figure as a bowler. He started out as a bowling all-rounder. By the time we got to 1902, he's a batting all-rounder essentially who bowls a bit. His fielding remained brilliant throughout his career, but yeah. So there was that transition, and his batting, like most players, like great players, he learnt what risks he could take and what risks he couldn't take, and he used to get stumped a lot in his early days. It's quite sort of basic errors. He ironed some of those out, and he developed a method that worked really well for him. He was a very fast scorer, and he failed a lot, but he actually scored more than 50 hundreds in his career, and in that era on those pitches, that was a lot. So he was a very good batsman, and could play some very good innings against very good bowlers. He wasn't a slogger. He was much better than that.
Now, we're talking about the Ashes of 1902, aren't we? England hadn't won the Ashes for quite a while, and this particular series they'd already lost. 4 tests had gone. One of them, the previous test at Old Trafford, very exciting test, famously known as Fred Tate's match, because he was the last man, wasn't he? And he got dismissed with 2 to win or something, so Australia won by 2 or 3 runs. It was famous for Victor Trumper getting 100 before lunch as well, wasn't it? Yeah. On a sort of slightly treacherous pitch. So England were 2-0 down, so they couldn't win the Ashes. But what was the sort of setting here? So the Oval, London was a major metropolis, wasn't it, at the time? I think it was the biggest city in the world, wasn't it? Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Oval was very much a centre point of London.
It was, yeah. And also there'd been the coronation of Edward VII 3 days before the game, just over in Westminster Abbey, so not far from here. So there was a sort of carnival atmosphere in London at the time. But England were very anxious to beat Australia. They'd lost. This was the 4th Ashes series they'd lost in a row. So they were becoming a bit paranoid about the fact they couldn't beat Australia. England regarded themselves as, they'd invented cricket. It was their game. And okay, they lost to Australia occasionally, but that was all right. But they were losing to Australia all the time. So although the Ashes, the series was decided, England were getting desperate to actually win a game against Australia because they hadn't won any in the previous series in England. So it was a big deal, and obviously they came close to losing this game, but Jessop's innings pulled the game out of the fire. So it was so when England did win the game eventually, it was all the more celebrated because it was important that England did win that match.
Now, there were 3-day tests, I think, weren't there, at the time? But they bowled so many overs, over 100 overs in a day, so it still had a long kind of lifespan as a match, 100 overs or so per day. I think this particular match lasted over 300 overs. Yeah. So even though they were 3-day games, there was still a lot of cricket to play.
Yeah, I mean, they bowled as many overs in a 3-day test in 1902 as you often get in some of the more recent England Bazball test matches, which have finished early. Obviously this summer we've seen some long games, but we've often had 3 or 4 day finishes with this team, and they'd have about the same number of overs as the one in 1902. So you might think 3-day test cricket is a bit short, but actually it's quite similar to what we get these days.
And what before we get into the detail of the actual innings, what prompted you to write this book?
I was interested in the Jessop innings because it was the record that none of the Bazballers could beat. They came close. In fact, the entire top 7 of this England team, if we count Stokes in the team, have all got very fast hundreds, except maybe Joe Root. All the others have got 190 balls or fewer. And Johnny Bairstow 3 years ago at Trent Bridge against New Zealand. He got a century in 77 balls. He failed to beat Jessop or match Jessop by 1 ball. We had Jamie Smith a few weeks ago, Edgbaston, getting 100 off 80. Harry Brooks got an 80-ball 100. So they were getting close to this Jessop's record, but they couldn't beat it. And which seems, in most sporting spheres, people do things faster, don't they? They run faster, they hit hit a golf ball further, etc. Everything gets better, but in cricket, in this particular area, these guys can't beat this record, even though they've got bats that are like railway sleepers compared to Jessop's little toothpick.
And you've handled Jessop's bat this innings.
Yeah, so the bat still exists. It belongs to the Lord's Museum, although when I saw it, it was down at Bristol, at the cricket ground in Bristol, on display. Got it out of the case, held it. Unusually long handle. So I compared the measurements to a Harry Brook bat that I was allowed to look at. Jessop's handle 4 centimetres longer, blade 4 centimetres shorter. The overall thing's the same. But also front to back, the modern bats, as you'll know, are very deep, aren't they? Maybe 4 centimetres from front to back. The Jessop one, maybe 2 centimetres. So there's a lot less wood in it, and therefore there's a lot less muscle to hit the ball into the distance.
Yeah. 6 ball overs. It just changed, hadn't it, I think? Australia was more, was it? Oh, they have 8 ball overs. I think there were 5 ball overs, a few years before. But anyway, it was 6 ball overs. And just to say also, of course, other countries' batters have scored faster Test hundreds. I mean, Viv Richards famously 56 balls. Misbah Hack was even quicker.
The record is held by Brendan McCullum,
and
ironically.
Yes, yeah.
54 balls.
54 balls,
so
yes.
That's another thing. I mean, I don't know if McCullum's ever mentioned it to the players. I think they do know about the Jessop record, but he could say, well, can't you get closer to me than 80 balls? 54 is astonishing. I mean, I think the reason why the England record is relatively slow compared to some of the other countries is because of our pitches historically are juicier, so seamers and swing bowlers will get a bit more out of it. You want a pitch where it's nice and flat and you can sort of hit through the line without worrying about the ball deviating, and so quite a few of the very fast hundreds are in places like Perth, where the bounce I think would be pretty true, wouldn't it? So places like that are the places where the fast hundreds are scored. But
the boundaries here now at the Oval are much shorter than they were then. In fact, I mean, the boundary behind us, sort of towards the pavilion, just to the one side of the pavilion, is very short, isn't it? So that would have helped now a modern player, but actually Jessop, the boundaries were very long, especially back to where we are.
Yeah, so this oval ground was the biggest in the country. I mean, it was for many years the playing area, and it was only when this stand was built ahead of the 2005 Ashes, maybe 20 years ago, that they actually encroached more onto the playing area that's behind us this way. So the boundaries at the Vauxhall end became shorter. So when Jessop was batting, he hit some balls into the pavilion when he was batting at this end, but when he was batting at the far end, he didn't hit a ball over the rope at this end because it's simply too far. You quite often got things like all-run 7s, 6s. I don't know. Even when you were playing, maybe some hits down in this corner could go a long way and not reach the rope. So it was an unusual playing area. And
also,
it was hard to
score. You couldn't score a 6, could you, unless you hit it out of the ground in those days. A shot over the boundary rope, clearing the boundary rope, was only 4. You had to hit it out of the ground, and presumably here that was almost impossible.
Yeah. So in Australia, if you hit it over the rope, you got 5 runs. In England, if you hit it over the rope, you only got 4, unless, as you say, it went out of the ground. But there was quite a bit of debate about what
constitutes the ground, I suppose.
Yes. So
because they didn't have stands all the way around.
The main stands in most grounds in England at that time would have been the pavilion, and then you'd have had sort of terrace seating, quite primitive, simple seating. But there would be a wall, boundary wall, obviously, like the sort of brick wall we've got here now would have been there. I think still, it's obviously you make people go through the gate and pay. Otherwise, they'd be getting in for free. But so there was quite a bit of debate about should they not get 6 runs. Joe Darling, the Australian captain in the Jessop match, was a big advocate of 6 runs. He was an attacking batsman, big hitter. He thought people should get more, and he said it would encourage more positive play if people got more runs. But in Jessop's innings, even when he hit it over the rope, which he did 3 times into the pavilion behind us, off Hugh Trumbull, Australia's best bowler, he only got 4. So his score would have been 110, and he would have reached his century in 1 ball fewer had he been given 6 6 runs for over the boundary hit.
Now, one of the other remarkable things about the innings was that he came in with England 48 for 5, chasing 263, which at the time I think had never been chased before in a Test match in England. Is that right?
No, that's right. Well, again, because of the 3-day matches, and also, more importantly, really uncovered pitches, it meant that bowling was, if it rained at all during the game, the pitch could become quite sort of chewed up almost and grippy and uneven in bounce. So batting could be very hard, particularly in England. In Australia, where perhaps the weather was better, it was different. But in England, scores were lower. I think the average in that series was low 20s, perhaps. Typically now we'd get something in the 30s. But so when he walked out to bat 48 for 5, England were in desperate straits, and it was about 20 minutes till lunch. The batsman he joined, F.S. Jackson, Stanley Jackson, he was a superb all-wicket player, and they had a partnership of over 100 together. And Jackson quickly realised that Jessop was going berserk, and that actually all he needed to do was stay in, give him the strike, and let him get on with it. But it was important that Jackson didn't get out. So Jackson played that role perfectly for a long time. And
it sounds as if, just looking through the innings, it sounds as if he wasn't just slogging. He liked to back away and hit through the offside, sort of behind square and through cover. So that's a bit Botham-like. What else? What were the other signature shots?
Well, he would drive the bowler down the ground, maybe force the bowler to then drag his length back for fear of being driven again, and then he'd go back and cut or sort of take it round the corner to square leg. He hit a lot of so Trumbull was the main Australian bowler. The guy at the other end, Jack Saunders, was a left armer.
So these were spinners, maybe.
So he was spinning it, cutting it. There's a lot of sort of, because of the way the turf was, there'd be a lot of cutting going on and stuff like that. So Saunders was left arm, and he fetched him around the corner a lot. And in fact, there was one over where he hit him for 4 fours in a row, and they all went to the same place, basically square leg or just behind, backward square leg. So he loved playing square of the wicket, but if you pitched it up, he would drive. I mean, I'm trying to compare him to modern players. I feel like, although Duckett is a left-hander, I think he was quite like Duckett, play square of the wicket. Also hit it in unusual areas, again, sort of frustrating for the bowler and difficult to set a field.
Yes, I mean, hit it where fielders weren't.
Absolutely, yeah. And then maybe in terms of like the crouching that he did, that's more like Owen Morgan, if you remember. He used to get down really low, didn't he, and get a sort of like almost get his eyes below the level of the ball. Again, a left-hander, but I think if you want to know what he looked like, I think it's probably a combination of those two, if you can turn him around into a right-hander. But he was... The other thing he did, people talked about a lot, was how he would move his hands up and down the handle according to what shot he played, and this is why he wanted the long-handled bat. He'd move it a lot.
That gave him more leverage.
Yeah, give him more leverage.
Owen Morgan used to do that, hold his bat very high up the handle to give your blade a bit more length and therefore hopefully more distance.
Yes, so again, like Morgan. So really hard to bowl to, but just a brutal hitter, actually. You know, he hit it very hard and totally fearless. And so, I mean, it's interesting that he went in at 48 for 5, and that was how he decided to play. In 20 minutes before lunch, he got to 29. And
so very like Botham in 1981, in a way, at Headingley, I suppose, who came in a terrible situation and went for, in a way, almost slogged to start with, and kind of got away with it, and then played some good shots.
Yeah, so he had a couple of early escapes of the sort of a difficult stumping chance on 22, and then 29 he was dropped at long off by Victor Trumper, who was a very good fielder. A sort of drive that he sort of sliced slightly. It was a difficult chance by the sounds of it. After that, no chances at all. It was pretty pure hitting. So in the end, the Aussies decided to put on their leg spinner Warwick Armstrong, future captain of Australia. He bowled leg spin sort of down the leg side to try and frustrate him, and he did. He slowed him up. But I mean, Jessop still scored some boundaries off him, but he did slow him up, and he was the man who got him out in the end, just after he'd got to 100.
So he got to 96, and then he hit a boundary, I think, to get to his 100.
Yeah.
And I mean, people weren't given to sort of massive displays of celebration, but from reading your book, it sounds as if this was a sort of show-stopping moment.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, people didn't demonstrate in the same way, and batsmen didn't celebrate in the same way. But quite a few of the newspaper reports, which were obviously my main source of information, describe how the game stopped for several minutes, and they sort of remarked on the fact that the game came to a stop, and I think that was unusual. But the crowd was so excited and so delirious that, hats being thrown in the air and all this sort of stuff, that the game had to stop really until everyone calmed down a bit and they could continue.
And not only did we'll get to the conclusion of the match in a minute, but not only did England win the match in the end, but I think he won a bet, Jessop, didn't he, as well?
Yeah, he'd said he'd said a couple of nights earlier that in the team hotel that everyone was quite gloomy because it was raining the first night of the match. England players go back, the amateurs, by the way, the professionals would have been in a different hotel. The amateurs were sitting in fact, it's a hotel that's still there in Marylebone that England still use, actually. It's changed its name. But they were sitting there and it was raining outside, and rain was fatal. If you were batting next, rain was bad news because it would make the pitch tricky. And that's why Jessop said, I'll give, £10 to the man who can score 50 or 100. And he did. And I think a few people took a bet there with saying, well, none of us are going to score 100 on this pitch. It's impossible. It's going to be impossible. And anyway, he won the bet. So whether they paid up, I don't know.
And it enabled England to win the game eventually, although there was a lot more drama to come. And in the end, the last pair won the match, George Hurst and Wilfred Rhodes. How many did they need, and how did they get there?
Yeah, well, these are two very famous cricketers in English cricket, both from the same village in Yorkshire, Kirkeaton, famously. Both bowled left arm, both batted right-handed, and they came together with 15 needed. Wilf Rhodes was quite a few years younger than Hurst, early 20s. Batting at number 11, he was so good that he would end up opening the batting for England 10 years later.
I think he batted in every position, didn't he?
So he was a very good player, but they came together with 15 needed, and this is the source of the apocryphal remark about we'll get them in singles, which was not actually what they did, but they got them largely in singles. But Rhodes had a couple of escapes. I think it was a sort of half drop catch, and he was almost bowled and things like this. But they got there. They nudged them over the line. But again, the crowd by this point, by the end of the game, were beside themselves with excitement because it was so close, and it was unbearable to watch. And a lot of people left the ground. I think at lunchtime when England had been 48 for 4, they were still like 80 for 5 at the break, and some people left thinking we're going to lose, and then they found out subsequently they'd won, and of course you can't watch any TV highlights. There weren't any. If you missed it, you missed it.
There wasn't any TV footage, any photographs or anything?
So there was, yes. So photography was in its sports action photography was in its infancy. There were some pictures taken. There's one photograph of Jessop batting. He's hitting Saunders to square leg, but very few. There was a film company that took some footage of it, but it's lost. So photography was just national newspaper photography was in its infancy. Cine film was in its infancy. So yeah, we don't really have much to go on other than the printed word. The scorebooks of the match are lost. Yeah. So there's not much to go on in many ways.
And actually, that just brings me to the sort of climax of this book, in a way, I suppose. 76 ball 100, allegedly. How did they work that out, and how did you work out that it was less? Yeah,
so there was a newspaper cutting from what turns out to be from the Athletic News, which was a sports weekly. It was a good product, and the journalism was good, etc. And that appeared 5 days after the match finished. That was that cutting, although the sort of heading had been taken off, was in a scrapbook that's in the possession of the Jessop family, and they've still got it. But it was we don't know where it came from. Anyway, I liaised with the Jessop family, and they helped me, and we managed to track it down to the Athletic News. I then started looking through other national newspapers and regional papers in the British Newspaper Archive, which is a sort of ongoing digitisation process, and found some more cuttings. And I found Before I did my research, there was the 76 ball list was the only one we had. Athletic News was the only one. That's why Bill Frindle put it in the Wisden Records when he was running the Wisden Records in the 1980s. It's been accepted over time simply because it's the only thing we had. But there's no more. It's not sort of proven in any way. It's just a journalist from the Athletic News sat down and wrote out a list. I found another newspaper cutting from the Morning Leader, which is a paper that's largely forgotten, appeared the next morning after the game, Thursday, August the 14th. They had a list of also of every ball, but theirs was better because it gave the bowler's name against, so it was Trumbull, Saunders, etc. going down, listed the balls faced by Jessop in that over. So it's a remarkable piece of research in a way, because that's not the sort of thing people did in those days. Bill Frindle developed sort of linear scoring in this country in the 60s when he worked for the Test Match Special Team. But before then, you didn't get that sort of stuff. But not only did the Morning Leader he scored 4 off this ball, if it was a dot ball, didn't score, they'd say whether he played at it or whether he left it. Again, very unusual. So that list gave me 2 lists to work from and try and marry up. And with knowing who was bowling at which time, I was able to recreate the innings in far more detail than before, and then using additionally newspaper reports of games. There were 9 London evening papers operating then. They were all writing match reports as the game was going on, and also because Jessop was batting in the early afternoon, that was like on the newspaper deadlines. So they provided a lot of like snapshots of what was happening. So all that stuff, threw it into the pot, was able to recreate it quite closely, and the upshot is that I think that he scored his 100 off 72 to 74 balls. There's a couple of overs where these 2 ball by ball lists don't tally, and it's not clear which ball of the over the strike changed, so I can't pin it down to one number, but I can pick a range, and I think it's 72 to 74.
Sounds a painstaking piece of work, actually, detective work. So a century between 72 and 74 balls. Can it be changed in the records?
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's for other people to decide. Really, it's not. I don't run the records. I've sent it to. I've sent the book to people Philip Bailey, who runs the Wisden Records these days, and obviously there's people like Andy Zaltzman who work for TMS. He's seen it. That's not my job really. It's up to them what they do, but. It'd be nice, I think, if an England player could maybe get 100 off 71 balls, and then that would be the end of the argument. If it was 73, it's going to be like, well, okay, has he broken it or not? And I'll probably be public enemy number 1. And
probably you thought a year or so ago, when you were sort of working on this, you thought, well, England are going to beat this at some point pretty soon. But actually, Bazball Mark II is a bit more nuanced, and well, somebody called it in the last Test match Bazball with brains. So maybe not. Maybe they won't beat it.
No. Well, are
you hoping that they do or they don't?
I think I'd like someone to beat it. It seems bizarre that they haven't really. And these guys are capable of it, I think, aren't they? I mean, Harry Brook or Jamie Smith would be my favourite. If I was betting on who would do it, I'd pick Brook or Smith at the moment.
Or maybe Duckett.
Duckett scores very fast. Yeah, he does.
And he got quite close.
Yes, he's his average. So the other day I looked at the number of balls these guys were taking to score their hundreds, and I think Duckett's got 600s, and his average speed to 100 is 106 balls, which is amazing for an average, isn't it? But they are getting slower. If you look at the average balls per 100 to get to 100, each year of Bazball it's got slower. They're now taking 10 balls longer to get to their hundreds than they did in 2022. So they're going the wrong way, I'm afraid.
Well, hopefully more publicity for your book then. Great. So it was called Chasing Jessop after the 1902 100 that he made here at the Oval. So look out for that. Published by
Bloomsbury.
Out this week. I'm sure you'll hear more about it. And obviously, as we said, the Test match starting here tomorrow. Exciting prospects. Don't forget also our series on the 2005 Ashes. Another episode of that is coming out shortly on the Crickverse, my blog, the Crickverse, CRICVRSE, about the Edgbaston Test match, that amazing Test match of 2005, which England won by 2 runs. But in the meantime, Simon Mann and I will be back tomorrow to review the first day's play from this Test match at the Oval. Simon, thank you very much, and good luck with the book.
Thank you.